All right, we're at the top of the hour, so we have a lot of ground to cover today, so let's just start. I see people are joining. We're 83 people already. That's great. Welcome. Thank you for coming. So today we have with us Ian Smith, Kevin Duffy from Oracle, and Brett Cameron from VSI, and we'll be talking about migrating to x86 in general. We'll have the long-awaited update on the Oracle RDB and other products from Oracle from Kevin and Ian, and we'll have a presentation from Brett on our application services projects, so about how we're moving our customers' environments to x86. And then we'll have some time for a Q&A. So this is our loose agenda for today. And let me just, without further ado, we'll start with the presentation from Kevin and Ian, and I'll just give me a second. I will share their slides. Okay. Here we go.
Okay.
So if you have questions during this presentation or later, please leave them in the Q&A section. This way we can track them easily, and we will address all of the questions after the presentations, and we'll send out a Q&A summary at the end with the recording, just so you know. And I'm giving access to Kevin, the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can. I've clicked. Okay, good. All right, so the advancement is working. Let me go back. So first, just let me, I want to give a big thank you to VSI for inviting us to speak at this webinar. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody that's joining today. This will be a joint presentation, as Daria said, with myself and Ian Smith, and we're going to give you an update of what's been happening at Oracle on VMS. We always have to include this as our safe harbor slide, but it's particularly important for what we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about futures. So what we say is not a commitment of release or the timing of releases, et cetera. It's kind of standard legal boilerplate, but we do have to alert customers to that before we speak. The agenda. Yeah, okay. I'll first talk about support dates and what's happening there, then recent releases, then what's under development, and there we'll be talking about x86 and some other projects. That's where I'll hand things off to Ian, and then we'll come back and I'll talk about cloud, and I'll end with a roadmap. So just a reminder, when we talk about RDB, we generally just use the term RDB, but we're really referring to the entire product family. So that includes RDB, the server, Codicil, DBMS, Common Data Dictionary, JDBC. You can see the list of products here. So that's what you should keep in mind as we talk about what's happening with RDB. Okay, so let's talk about support dates for RDB. Now, most of the vast majority of the customer base is either on 7.3 or 7.4, where I think now the majority, certainly majority, is on 7.4 of RDB. For customers that are still on 7.3, in case you didn't know, we entered sustaining support at the end of September of last year. So it is a supported release. We'll give best effort to fix problems, but there's no more patches to 7.3. For 7.4, you'll see that we have Premier support listed here with a December 2025. And just what I want to let people know here is that we are in the process of getting that extended. So don't read this as, oh, support's ending at December of 2025. We've already gone through some of the steps. There's some additional steps we need to take before we can make that public, but we will have new support dates for the 7.4 line that will be made public once all the approvals, et cetera, are completed. And I've also included the same, it's basically the same story for Codicil DBMS. It follows the same support line as RDB. So again, that will be extended as well. Okay, so what I'll talk about now is some of the things that the releases we've put out to market in the last 2 years. I'm really just going to cover the first 3 of these. Because we did put out new versions of RDB, Codicil DBMS, and a terminal version for RDB 7.3. But just note also there is a version of the visual tools for Visual Studio that was shipped last year, and we did have a 7.4.1.2 version in August of 2022 of RDB. So I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on what's in these releases. Just basically, this is just to highlight that they're there for you to upgrade to. So 7.4.1.3 was released in June. You can see the patch numbers here to find them on My Oracle support. And there's been a number of fixes that are included in that. For example, the system space buffer not freed after RMU close. That's an example of one of the important bugs that we were working on for that release. So we always recommend customers to go to the latest. This is an incremental release fixing problems, and you would avoid potentially hitting these in production if you go through to upgrade. This is just a screenshot of the 7.4.1.3 on My Oracle support. Again, you're going to get copies of these slides, so you can just use that for reference. Codicil DBMS in the same manner was released the same month, June of this year. And you can see the patch numbers there to find this easily on My Oracle support. Now for Codicil DBMS, it had been a longer time since we shipped the last version. So this actually includes some new features as well as bugs fixed. And again, these are partial lists. You can read the complete list of what's contained in these releases in the release notes. So just note that is there for you to upgrade to as well. And here's a screenshot on My Oracle support for 7.4.1.3. And as I mentioned, for 7.3, we're now in sustaining support. So if you are on 7.3, it would be a good idea for you to upgrade to this terminal release to make sure that you are caught up to all the bug fixes that we had made available within the 7.3 stream. We went into sustaining support at the end of September of last year, and this was released in July. And this was a considered effort to bring ourselves forward and make sure that customers that, for whatever reason, needed to stay on 7.3 would benefit from all of the fixes that we had made. This was over a year worth of development to catch up with 7.3.4. Okay, so what's under development today? Of course, we're working on a beta kit for the x86 version of RDB, Codicil DBMS, as well as the other members of the product family. And Ian's going to talk about that in a second. However, we also have imminent ships of CDD, the Common Data Dictionary, and Trace. When I say imminent, we're talking about releases that'll come out within the next 2 weeks. Is our anticipation. So you'll be seeing announcements on that very shortly. So and we also are preparing a new a 7.4 version of replication option. That's a little bit behind where we are with CDD and Trace, but that'll be following in the near future as well. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Ian, and he's going to talk about the x86 port.
Okay, I'm passing control to Ian.
Thank you. Well, yes, my name's Ian Smith. If you haven't met me before, hello. I've been a long time VMS user. Just advance my slide. Yeah, I'm not getting the advance working.
Yeah, Ian, I clicked on mine to get it going first. Click on the slide first.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Sorry, it must have been a little bit of lag there. So I thought I'd give some credentials. I won't read them all, but I've been around a long while. I've been using VMS since 1978, and that's not a typo. And I started working in DEC RDB engineering in 1989. So, and I'm still here. Just to lay out the context, we're talking about the product family here. It's a very large code base. I suspect it's probably second only to VMS in size of VMS specific code. We maintain all our source code as single source, so there's no duplication of modules for different platforms, and it's heavily uses conditional compilation to give us, well, it's been 5 or 6 different platforms over the years. On top of that, we have many tools used for building our products and for testing. Mountains and mountains of DCL, as you can imagine. But we also have many tests that we use to run applications written in Fortran, COBOL, C, C++, BASIC, Pascal, Bliss, etc., that exercise our product in sometimes small tests that take a couple of seconds, and sometimes they, consume all available memory, so we know that we've got our boundary tests working correctly, and they can take hours to run. So around 2018, the development team had face-to-face meetings with VSI, who were just down the road from us, talked to engineers and management, very informative. We have a very close relationship. I've known a lot of the engineers for decades, so that was good. We, in Oracle, highlighted our need for C++, which at the time was a distant goal for VSI. I'll talk a little bit more about C++ shortly, but also to remind them that as we used to be part of Digital Equipment Corporation, we used the GEM backend for our own compilers, SQL Pre and SQL Mod. So when you run those tools on Alpha or Itanium, they will be using the GEM backend that we were granted back in the days of Alpha, and then during the port to x86 from Digital Compact / HP back in the day. VSI described their strategy for compilers and VMS releases, and we've been eagerly watching that unroll over the years. So phase 0 in the early days, there's no compilers yet. So a small team set to work doing what we could to prepare for the release of the operating system and cross-compiler environment. One of the early documents that I exchanged with VSI asked the question, what does $F get SYI return for arch name? And they told us that this was going to be the string, and they stuck to that, because then we started modifying thousands of DCL scripts, probably, that needed to know, if not directly that lexical function, the results of it. We, in our environment, set up a global symbol for our environment that either says native x86 or cross x86. We also did that for Alpha and Itanium and VAX and so on. So we kind of subvert that in, so that means we could isolate those sort of changes in some places. But in our test system, it's a different matter, because there's a lot of cases where it needs to know the platform. Of the roughly 10,000 tests, a small number of them, I'm going to guess 2,000 maybe, really want to know about the platform. Because what they try to do is, if I'm running on x86, I want to do remote access to alpha. Or if I'm doing something on an x86 system, then I want to do remote access to alpha and or titanium. So there's a lot of decision making that had to get revised to make sure we included coverage for x86. As you probably are all doing, if you're thinking of upgrading code that has conditional compilation, we have a lot of code in C, Bliss, DCL, and other places where we needed to expand our platform specific choices to include either x86, 64, whatever that looks like. This is just pseudocode, but in a lot of places, because alpha, titanium, and x86 look identical for the purposes of C runtime library or whatever, we just collapse them all into what we call modern VMS, so that anything that knows about 64 bits and all the latest system services, we just bundle together. Phase 2 came when we started getting cross compilers in our environment. Still no operating system yet, nor did we have the virtual systems established within Oracle at this point. That was under doing research and also to find the hardware or virtual systems to run them on. We have an environment where we wanted to make sure that all our procedures knew about x86, but sometimes it needs to be very specific choices. Oh, I'm in the cross environment, so this particular procedure that says create this C module on the fly, compile it, link it, run it, and then use the output as a header file for some other process can't be done on the cross environment, because the C compiler in cross mode generates x86 code, and therefore the link generates an x86 executable, and on my IA64 system that does not run. And that was an interesting task to actually uncover all those mostly hidden dependencies. What we did then is, of course, where the execution was wanted, we rather cheated and then just executed the IA64 version that was built in another branch of the build tree. There's a lot of new warnings, an enormous number of warnings coming out of the compilers. One of the things it did was alert us to the fact that our own build system was out of date by a couple of years with C compilers that had been released, which we just missed that COVID brain, I would assume. So once we did that, a lot of these same warnings appeared for alpha and titanium. But that took time to assign engineers to track down the warnings. And in general, those warnings were good product quality improvements for across all platforms, where the compiler was now alerting us to possibly unexpected behavior because of what was being coded that was not picked up by earlier versions of the compiler. In addition to that, the x86 compilers diagnosed a lot more things that in the past were, well, they were basically shielded. We were shielded from it because the compiler said, you know what, I know pick attribute in PSEX means nothing, so I'll just ignore it. But now lots and lots of our code that use the PSEC definitions. So Pragma in C, for instance, allows us to do that. We're now being diagnosed with, using PIC where we didn't really need it or want it for Itanium and now for x86. Also, some of the link options files, a lot of them we generate on the fly. We execute a command procedure which knows about platform and version and a bunch of other dependencies and builds these. So that had to be modified to include, subtle things. Like if you're in the cross environment, I've got to include the libraries from x86 library or something like that. One of the biggest hurdles we had was getting native versions of the SQL Pre and SQL Mod compilers. Special thanks to the VSI compiler team for helping us. They would give us drops of a bunch of libraries. I can't remember how many we are now, but something like 40 libraries that we need to link with. That gave us a bridge between our gem calls, which were implemented back in the 90s, to generate code using LLVM, which is the new backend that's being used by VSI. And in general, it was pretty straightforward. There were a small number of changes that we had to do. For example, we found that the names of variables and the names of PSEX could not be the same under LLVM. So we had to do changes to make them unique. And wherever possible, we try not to make these platform specific. And in fact, the latest 7413 kit has a lot of the changes to the pre-compilers that came out of this project. Completely invisible to customers, but certainly makes our maintenance job a lot easier. Once version 9.0 arrived, we could start deploying images and running them on the virtual system, and that was a whole other interesting task. C++ was a big challenge for us. As I said, it was a highlight. We need it. It's the bridge between the RDB server itself and any application that you write, whether it's SQL, RDML, RDO, RDB pre, they all talk through the dispatch layer, which is primarily C++. So we got the Clang compiler, raw and no DCL interface, and we would push the compiles through to a true x86 system running 9.1 probably at this point. And we then worked our way through our code base for several of the layered products that use C++ to get it compiling. That's a big, long story, and I won't go through all the details, but needless to say, we just appreciate the input from the C++ engineers who took our issues and reproducers and came back with kits. We, during 2021 and 2022, had a lot of drops of the C++ compiler to add DCL qualifiers and as well as fix problems that we'd found in the Clang interface. If you're using C++, read the release notes. 1.4, the differences between C++ on i64 and x86 64 is very important to read. We in RDB share header files between C and C++. So these changes, for some unknown reason, the data type long was used prolifically in code that was written in the 90s. I think the engineers involved thought long was going to be a long word forever, but we've since changed that to in64 or UN64 is appropriate. But anyway, just read those release notes. They're there for a reason. They're important. During native builds, so earlier this year, we started migrating from the cross environment. We know that the various compilers have stabilized considerably. We're already running our C++ compiles natively, but we started transitioning all our builds, 100% of it, to be now native on our x86 systems. We have 5 x86 nodes in our development cluster, along with Alpha and Titanium. And lo and behold, some of the builds were failing because tools were missing. And when we tracked them down, it turned out they were written in VAX-scan. And for those of you who remember, it was a very powerful tool that Digital released in for VAX, but it was never ported elsewhere. But the images it generated, the developers back in the 90s would use the VEST utility to make a TyVest version that ran under Alpha, and the tool continued to live on under Alpha. And then when the Titanium port happened, the next thing that happened was it got AESted, which was basically the tool that allowed emulation of Alpha images to work by then taking those originally VAX images and running them on Titanium. And these have been running daily for all those years. And by this stage, the engineers involved in running the build system had no idea this was done, back in 2000. Obviously, no chance of using VAX-scan. There's no equivalent to VEST or AEST on x86. So we ended up, around this time, the OpenJDK arrived on v9.2 of VMS. So we deployed a new Java-based tool across all our platforms to replace these old VAX-scan tools. Memory management is a huge problem for us. We know that customers probably don't care about what we do internally, but we use kernel level code to access the page table entries, and we needed expert help from VMS for these 2 projects, and we're just very grateful for that. And it's now running in our testing environment. We're now doing full native builds, pure C++ command, identical to what we use on Alpha Titanium. We add new compilers to our testing mix weekly, and I just installed 4 this week. DBMS was the first to run. DBMS shares the kernel coder with RDB, so it was a good way to exercise that. There was no C++ dependency, didn't use SQL pre, SQL mod, smaller code base. So here's an example from 2021 of doing a show system on one of our x86 nodes. Does some commands that shows that the database needs converting, and the database got converted, and then it ran. The RDB first boot was about a year later, once we had C++ and SQL pre, SQL mod running, and we could now run RMU show users, and we had the MF personnel database attached and queries running by this stage. Just sort of thrown here, the dictionary operator is also running. This is the T74-2 version that we're running in our test environment. Some final notes. The on-disk format for x86 is unchanged. It's true for RDB, DBMS, and CDD. So there's no platform conversion or anything like that. The same after image format. So if you've got AOJs that you want to apply to a database, the same format exists, and we use that. So if you do run the same version of the Oracle RDB server on Alpha Integrity, you can share the database. So for instance, if you were to to try and share the database in a beta environment, you'd have to upgrade to the beta versions of the equivalent alpha and integrity systems. So now back to Kevin.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, just to close out, so where do we stand now? So our testing is showing very good progress. We have roughly 10,000 tests, and you can see we've got about 9,000 of those running. Some of the tests aren't running yet because there's some components that aren't yet available for us to test on x86, but we've got a pretty high success rate. There are, however, there are still outstanding problems. We have ACK files we're investigating. We have issues with the optimizer picking run strategies based on floating point differences, and there are a variety of issues that we are investigating and talking to VSI about. Anything that requires an upgrade, say to the compilers or to VMS itself. We've reported all these things and are working closely with VMS, with VSI to get those addressed. There is for example, there's an image activation problem that we know we'll need for beta. We believe that's I think slated for 9.2-3, and we're continuing as we continue to run more tests and discover more issues to work those out. They're not all, it's not everything turns out to be a VSI issue. They're internal issues for us. And when we discover things that do require changes that VSI needs to give us, then we're talking to them about that. So testing continues. Okay. I just want to say a word too before I get to the roadmap about the Oracle Cloud. So we have been largely running on VirtualBox, but we are now moving to KVM. We have part of our development environment is now migrated to KVM. That's important because VirtualBox is not meant for production production use. KVM is, and KVM is also if you deploy in the Oracle Cloud, that is the hypervisor that you're going to be using in the Oracle Cloud. So showing that we can run VMS under KVM, which we are doing today in our environment, is basically a proof point for what we'll be coming out with. It's our intention when we finally release on x86 is to also make this an option, make this available in the Oracle Cloud, and we're working with VSI on that. They have some projects working on the Oracle Cloud as well. So for customers that are thinking of potentially going to the cloud instead of deploying on-prem, that is definitely our intention is to support that. Just a note too, we do actually have for customers that are running alpha, you can run those under emulators. Stromysys and AVTware are the primary ones, and we actually do have a customer. This is an Oracle Classic customer that's been running in the Oracle Cloud for several years now. So that's. But we obviously we're hoping to have more customers join in the cloud. Okay, so roadmap. For 7.3, it continues in sustaining support. For 7.4, I talked about the imminent releases for CDD and Trace, so that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So that is in this part of the second half of 2024. For the beta and production release, I listed here H1 2025. It's going to depend. We're certainly not going to delay anything. As soon as we can get something that is ready for release, we will be doing that. But there are enough things that are outstanding that we need to resolve that I'm thinking it's likely it could be towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, before we can get a beta kit out. And then when we release, production release is going to depend on the beta and what the results are, what customers are seeing. If everything's smooth, we could have a shorter beta, maybe say a 3-month period, and then go to production ship. However, if we start seeing customers report problems that we never were able to test in our environment, then that could take longer. So there's definitely some unknowns here, but we are working with high priority for both beta and production release as well. You'll see x86 support continues beyond shipping, say, production release. That's because initially this is the RDB server will have, and then other components like CDD trace will follow. But SQL services is a component that's going to be in phase 2 of our release. And also OCI services. There's additional work to do there. We will be picking up those projects as we stabilize things for the main server, and both for RDB and Codicil DBMS. So there's other pieces of the whole product family that I showed you that we'll be working to bring to market on x86 following the initial beta and production release of RDB server and Codicil DBMS, the server. Yeah, so I just have basically the same roadmap for Codicil DBMS. And I just wanted to also mention that when we do go to beta, that we'll be releasing under the Oracle beta program. And this is how all beta software is released within Oracle. There are some steps we need to take to processes, internal Oracle processes, before we can release under the beta program office. One of them is a security certification that we have to undergo. That is going to take some time. That we're looking at that now, and that will take some cycles before. So that won't just be an immediate, like, here's the kit we can release. We're going to have to do some other internal steps before we can release under that beta program office. So that's another reason why I'm looking at potentially the first half of 2025 for a beta. That could be January. It could be. It depends how that effort's going to go. So again, we're going to work diligently to get that completed. So that was what we had. We're doing next. We can go to Q&A. I'm not sure if we're doing QA. I think are we going to Brett and then doing Q&A in general?
Well, let's go to Brett and then do a Q&A.
Okay, great.
We usually do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Daria.
Thanks. I will stop sharing, and I'll make sure that Brett can. I think Brett can share.
I think I can. Yep.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Ian.
Yep.
Okay, so hopefully I'm sharing now. What do I want to share? That's the question. Oh, how do you drive this thing, Daria? What am I sharing at the moment?
You are not sharing anything.
Oh, it's not very good then, is it? Okay.
Usually gives you share screen or share an app.
Okay, so hang on. If I click on share, it says the host isn't allowing multiple presenters for sharing.
But we're not sharing. Hang on a second here.
Ah, it's looking more promising.
Okay. Yeah, maybe there's just some lag.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully we can see that. Yep.
Perfect.
We're looking good. Okay, so I'll try to talk reasonably quickly so there's plenty of time for questions. I'm sure people have got questions for Kevin and Ian. This is a fairly short version of a larger presentation, which just talks a little bit about the application services group that we're setting up within VSI, which is aimed at helping customers to do a number of things. Obviously, a fairly high priority is providing services to help customers to move their applications to x86, but there are a number of other services that are bundled in there as well. So I'll just look to go through that really, really quickly. Also just talk briefly about a case study, which is a project, a migration project we're currently working on, and just basically to give you a feel for the kind of approach we take to these projects. And probably not too much more than that. So hopefully I can talk quickly and not fall asleep and leave some time for questions. So fundamentally, application services is all about helping customers to make the most out of their open VMS application environments. like I said, a hot topic there is obviously helping customers to get to x86. And what we found in our discussions is some customers will need more help than others. You know, at one end of the spectrum, customers know what they're doing, they've got the skills in-house, and they can port those applications themselves. At the other end of the spectrum, you know, potentially they need a lot of help and might call on us or indeed other partners to help them with the entire migration process. In addition to those kind of migration projects, application services also encompasses other things that customers need to help them get the most out of their VMS application environments. Integration is a very common one. How do I connect my VMS application environment to this new thing that the boss bought last week? We can help you with that. Just modernization in general. And in the context of modernization, you know, we've also had conversations with some customers who are very keen to move to x86, but it's maybe best if they get their ducks in a row and do some preparatory work on the Itanium environment, on integrity, before they make the jump to x86. Maybe they need to bring the versions of some software up to spec, up to date, latest versions and so forth, and just tidy up a few bits and pieces to make life easier when it comes to actually making the move to x86. Application maintenance and support, I'll maybe mention that a little bit later, but that really comes down to if you've got an application environment on OpenVMS and you're really struggling to find people to help you look after that application environment, we can provide services again to help you with that and effectively take over the workload of maintaining and supporting those application environments. So in terms of migrations, Norm did a good talk in the last webinar, talking about how straightforward it is to rebuild your code on x86. I mean, maybe having heard just what Ian's had to say about the process the RDB team have been through, it's not always quite as easy as Norm made out, but you know, more often than not, it's not too bad as far as recompiling and linking your code is concerned. But in some cases, it's a lot more complicated than that, and a bit more work is going to be required. And it's important to, you know, think about it now and talk to us before you actually embark on a project. You know, make sure that you've understand what you've got there, all the software products you're using. Do you actually have all the code? When was the last time you built it? All of those sorts of things. You know, if everything's in place, then generally speaking, yeah, it can be relatively plain sailing, and the biggest task is actually doing the testing on x86 once you've got things built. But there are plenty of situations where perhaps there's a third-party product that's available on Alpha or Integrity, but it's not available on x86, and some sort of architectural changes will be required, or maybe you've got some missing code. Maybe you don't even know if you can build the application. We can help with all of these things and help you to do the planning and get it across the line. In terms of the migration service, I mean, this kind of, I suppose what I've put together here dates back to years of experience and time I spent working with HP Enterprise Services, you know, over a decade ago in terms of the general process. But a lot of this just boils down to common sense, to be perfectly honest. We'll generally start off with some kind of assessment. We call that a discovery phase, where we'll look at the code, we'll look at your environment, how you've got things set up and so forth, and we'll make a general high-level assessment of risks, of maybe an order of magnitude cost, how much effort is it going to take to actually port this environment to x86. If there are any areas that we consider maybe high risk or that just require some further investigation beyond the scope of that discovery phase, which is normally a pretty condensed piece of work, we might look to do some kind of elaboration just to try and tie down those risky areas, a little bit more information, and to maybe better quantify pricing and things like that. And if there are some really high risk bits, or perhaps there are some areas where we need to replace one product with another architectural change, we might look to work with you to do some kind of pilot project just to validate what we're thinking there. But you know, in many cases, the elaboration and pilot phases aren't required, and you can jump straight into doing the migration and obviously, you know, finish off with the deployment followed by a party. But yeah, there can be some challenges, and it's important to be thorough about this. If you've got a code base that's 6 or 8 million lines of code, and it's a mixture of different languages, and you've got an assortment of technologies. I mean, Ian gave the example there with VACSCAN. The Oracle RDB team are rebuilding and working on RDB on a daily basis, certainly a weekly basis, and to get partway through porting to x86 only to discover that there's a dependency on VACSCAN. That's exactly the sort of thing that can happen, right? So just talk very, very briefly about a case study. This is, I would describe this as a medium complexity project for a customer, industrial customer in Scandinavia. It has a mixture of C, C++, and Fortran code, probably in about equal measure. I assume they probably started off writing the code back in the 80s and 90s in Fortran, and that's subsequently been supplemented with some C and C++. And this particular application on VMS interacts with a Sybase database running on Windows. So in general terms, I would have to say I actually took on the job of trying to build this code, and it was actually pretty much plain sailing. Ian identified some of the things that you need to be aware of with C++. But aside from that, I think, yes, the additional compiler warnings and so forth, but there was nothing in there as far as rebuilding that code that I considered rocket science. Just a case of being thorough and making sure you've got everything, and do pay attention to those compiler warnings. Obviously, Sybase here was an issue. The customer in question had done, much like Ian described with VACSCAN, done some vesting and AESting over the years, and the Sybase Open client had been binary translated to work on integrity. Obviously, that wasn't going to go any further. It wasn't going to go to x86. So this is one of those situations where we had to work with the customer to figure out an architectural change. How could we swap out the Sybase Open client and use something else that would allow them to interact with their Sybase database? So in this case, we used the free TDS API, a little open source library that I've used successfully in the past. And that's worked very, very well for this customer. We provided a small embedded SQL preprocessor that works with their C, C++ code. And in general terms, that project has gone very, very well. Their environment is relatively simple, 2-node cluster. There's not many lab products. So from a system perspective, it's not too complicated. And as I say, probably a medium complexity on the code. And 300,000 lines of code is not too big an application, really. But obviously, this is business critical. If this thing fails, the customer has a bit of a mess on their hands, put it that way. So in terms of how we do these projects and the general sort of layout of the scope, just very, very quickly, obviously we need to look at the customer's system environment. What hardware do they need going to x86, what layered products and so forth. And for this particular project being in Scandinavia, as I mentioned, my good friend Robert Nydal has done a superb job working with the customer to get the x86 system set up and working nicely. That's gone very, very well. From the application perspective, I defined, as I said before, we start off with the discovery phase, maybe some elaboration, and then we get on with the migration. At the start of this project, we did a fairly comprehensive review of the customer's code, made sure it was complete, looked for any potential issues, documented findings and so forth. We considered this one relatively low risk. Obviously, from a porting perspective, we've done quite a lot of the work here with the customer largely replicating what we've done, I suppose. And we did that compiling and linking within our own environment, and essentially gave the customer our results for them to build within their environment and to do testing. And this is one thing that people often forget or don't kind of think about, perhaps, when it comes to testing. We might be experts at helping customers to port their code, but we don't know what their applications do. We don't understand the business logic. We don't need to understand the business logic in order to port it. So a key part of any migration effort, and again, thinking of Ian's talk with all the testing the team do on RDB, that's the same for any major customer application. So an important thing here is to make sure that if you're porting to x86, that you know how to test it, you've got test procedures, you've got processes that can validate that the ported application is producing the right results. And obviously the deliverables at the end of any of these migration projects is a working environment, some successfully ported code, everything builds nicely and runs correctly. And invariably, it's good to provide some documentation about how those newly set up x86 systems hang together. Just very, very quickly, a couple of other services here in general. I mentioned modernization at the start of the talk here. Just as a general topic, you know, it's the number of times I talk with customers and they're concerned about how they can integrate with some other system within their enterprise, or another common one these days is how they can integrate with cloud services. There are multiple reasons for customers wanting to do these things. So again, you know, I'm happy and my team are happy to talk with customers about these kinds of issues. And we can invariably come up with solutions. You know, so sometimes there are challenges for sure, but there's usually a way to do what's required. I'm not going to waste time going through all this. Just some common scenarios as far as modernization is concerned. I mentioned integration, replacement of unsupported software components. These could be things that, you know, the third-party provider is just gone out of business or otherwise stopped supporting the software on VMS. What can we do about that? Increased adoption of open source technologies. Maybe you're looking to reduce license costs, or you want to other bits of your environment use products that conform to certain open standards, and you need VMS to participate and interact with those systems. There can be multiple reasons for wanting to do modernization initiatives. And we're happy to help you here. I mean, generally speaking, this is kind of a 3 or 4 step process, I suppose. You know, we'll have workshops with you and come up with a plan, come up with a strategy. We'll make sure we've got the team to execute on that strategy. We'll start off by doing some fairly tactical improvements, just to validate the strategy and maybe get some quick wins. And then we'll embark upon a fairly strategic modernization program, which, depending on how large and complex your environment is, could take, you know, months to years. It just depends what you need to do. Other application services, just very quickly, I talked about modernization and porting to x86. I mentioned integration. Application maintenance and support, I did mention that, but I'll just reiterate that really. As I say, we're perfectly happy to talk to you if you've got some challenges, facing some challenges looking after your old Open VMS applications. We can look at helping out there by providing application maintenance and support services where we take over looking after the code, making enhancements for you, bug fixes, and so on and so forth. I do appreciate there can be some complexities here. You know, certain customers in certain jurisdictions can't necessarily share code outside national borders and things like that sometimes. But we can have the discussion and see what may or may not be possible. So a quick summary. Obviously, we do have a fair degree of knowledge and understanding of Open VMS. We've got some pretty skilled people. Like Ian says, on the compiler team, there's you know, some serious brains trust in there, and indeed elsewhere within the organization. And we're now growing our services capability as well to help customers with their application environments. And I think we are uniquely positioned to help customers do this, given the information that we have access to and the skills that we have on board. Let me see. Generally speaking, I think VMS customers historically, maybe over the past decade or whatever, have tended to have 4 common technology challenges or business concerns, which are summarized there. Uncertain future of VMS. Well, VSI has addressed that. We've ported the operating system to x86. We've well-defined roadmaps, which we're executing on. The technology expertise is there. I've talked a little bit about integration and things like that, but we can talk more about that from an interoperability perspective. And we've got services that can help you to modernize and keep those applications going and serving your business well for the foreseeable future. And as I put here, stealing a graphic from my old friend Chris Brown, VSI is the central part of the services jigsaw. So look, with that, Daria, I'll leave it there and hand back to you, and hopefully I've left some time for questions.
Thank you. Yes, I think we have time for questions. There aren't too many questions, to be honest, and most of them are to Oracle. So I can read them out loud, but also if Kevin and Ian can look at the Q&A section, there are some bits and pieces of code in a few questions that will be hard to read. Okay, so could you please clarify the imminent in 2 weeks? Was this in relation to both RDB and CDD?
No, that was for CDD and trace.
Okay.
Not for the beta kit.
Okay, so what are the expected dates?
Well, it's, like I said, within 2 weeks. We just met about this today. We're in the actual, very end game of this. Just doing some final touches on some documentation. The testing has really all been done. There's just going to be cycles in actually getting things uploaded onto my Oracle support. So
Right.
we're just at the very tail end of this.
So that's
Right.
CDD and trace, and then
the RDB beta kit is, I think, the intent of the question, Kevin.
Yeah, they asked for, yeah, and as I said, that does not include the beta kit. As I said in the roadmap, the beta kit, we still are resolving problems, issues. There's more work to be done, and so for that we're looking at, I'm saying early 2025 right now.
Okay. Can we use SQL services on x86 and also present the RDB database as an Oracle database using SQL services to some applications? We have quite some reporting solutions that only can connect to an Oracle database.
Right. So we do have the features called OCI services in RDB, and that allows RDB to present itself as an Oracle database through that interface. That is a phase 2 project. That will not be part of the initial release on x86. And that's true not only for OCI services, but also for SQL services. That's like I said, a phase 2 project to pick up, to complete the porting, the testing, et cetera, to bring that to market. So yes, the intention is definitely that we will give you that capability, but we are doing that in a second phase.
Okay. Will you make the JSON object function available on RDB like we have it on Oracle databases? And there is an example in the Q&A. If you can open that.
Yeah. We have not been discussing adding JSON. Ian, I don't know if you want to comment, but that's not in our project.
It has been looked at. It's probably not going to happen before we ship on x86. So yeah, it's doable, but it's a lot of investment in RDB to implement that. Oracle already has a very good implementation in Oracle database, so I think probably it will not happen in RDB.
Okay. When you make the OCI services available, will you also make the Pro4 Oracle precompilers available on x86?
The Oracle precompilers. No, that would be, you would use those precompilers on the Oracle side, and then you communicate to RDB as part of, say, a distributed transaction through OCI services. But we have our own precompilers. We're not going to make the classic Oracle precompilers available on RDB.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't understand that question correctly, but that's that.
Yeah, so this question's really about the Oracle client running on VMS, and Oracle's made the decision to discontinue that project. So the precompile is running on VMS to create VMS executables. Is something that is not on the table right now. If you have a need for that, you should really, contact Kevin and give some more detailed.
Right. So I am, yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Ian. That was clearly the question. I am maintaining a list of interests. I know, and we do have a number of customers that are keenly interested in having an Oracle client, classic client on VMS, on x86. And not only that, customers are asking for, just more recent version of the client available. So I'm at least maintaining an interest list. If we're in the position that we had cycles to do that work, it will be useful to have a business case to go along with that. And that's why I'm collecting the requests from customers. I've already heard from a number of customers on this. I have a list built, but if you've not contacted me in the past, please feel free to do that, and we can talk about your need and etc.
Okay, thanks. Any information regarding Oracle RDB licensing on OpenVMS x86?
So the licensing right now we license RDB in the same way as the Oracle database for enterprise server. That will continue. The difference will be that the core factor changes because it's x86 versus Itanium, where the core factor right now is 1 on Itanium and it's 0.5 for x86. That said, it's certainly within our, once we get closer to being able to production ship, that will be reviewed. We'll see if there's any other additional changes, but my anticipation is that that's how things will follow. It'll still be the same model. It's just that we're deploying on a different hardware platform with the different core factor. Now, deploying on the cloud, however, that's an entirely different thing. If you're interested in deploying, say, in the Oracle Cloud, there's a different way of licensing in the cloud, and we would follow the same steps that are in place for licensing on the Oracle Cloud for RDB in the same way that you would license the Oracle Enterprise Server.
Okay. Thanks. Ian Smith is typing an answer to Hans regarding the Oracle on VMS bootcamp event. So you'll find that in Answered, and we'll also release a document with all the Q&A. The next question is, will VMware ESXi be a natively supported hypervisor? And I guess it's to us rather than Oracle, or is a VMware KVM bridge VM needed? As far as I know, no bridge is needed. We are running on ESXi. I don't know what you mean by natively, but I have quite a few VMs on our ESXi systems running OpenVMS version 9.2-3, well, the newest kit that goes into field test like today. So I hope that answers the question. And then there is, I'm not sure if it's a question, we have quite some applications on OpenVMS using Oracle databases which need to be recompiled on x86. Well, I guess that's not a question. I'm not sure if Oracle has a comment.
Well, I think that again is a request for the Oracle client on x86, which we talked about.
Okay, and then there were a few questions in the chat. Question regarding interfacing Oracle on VMS. Is there any ODBC support provided, or is it only possible using OCI on clients?
So we will pick up an ODBC, make sure that works with the Oracle on on Oracle RDB on x86. We haven't really picked that project up, but we will be making sure that will communicate the way it does now with RDB on Itanium, that things will work with the x86 version.
Okay. And then there was another question, Oracle Classic done and dusted?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oracle Classic.
Okay.
Did you answer that?
Yeah, we already talked about Oracle Classic.
Okay. Yes, I think there were no more. Okay, well, we got another question. If SQL services and JDBC will be phase 2, will RDB remote work from IA64?
Yeah, Ian, I'm sure the answer is yes on that, but
Yeah, so I'm answering questions in the Q&A. So, which one was that?
It just came in.
Oh, it's one of the top.
Yeah, it's the only one in the queue now.
I was, okay.
Are you seeing it? Wayne Goodchild asked.
Yep. I'll answer. I'll type an answer, but also verbally do it. So JDBC is part of phase 1. It's currently building at the moment for x86. So, but RDB remote will work to and from IA64 just fine, whether you want to use that through SQL servers or JDBC to x86. But you'll also be able to use JDBC directly to all 3 platforms, because it's Java basically. So I kind of covered this in my talk, but remote access is part of our server offering. So our nightly testing uses x86 remote access to Alpha, to IA64, all multiple versions. It's very comprehensive. We even do access from x86 to RDB 7.1 running on Alpha. So, we're testing all those combinations as best we can.
Okay, thank you. And then another question is data tree functional in OpenVMS x86? I can take this one. I think data triv is dependent on CDD, so we're waiting for that release that Oracle says will be in 2 weeks. And then I think we'll work on that. That's to the best of my knowledge, but we'll put this question in the Q&A and that we distribute.
We're willing, Daria, we're willing to install DataTree if we have DataTree tests throughout our system. If you want to pass that along, we've asked before, but have not received answers to that. But we're willing to help. Okay,
amazing. Thank you, Ian. Right, and then I believe the last question in the chat is when final release of SQL Relay recompiler be available? Maybe Brett can take that, or I'm not sure if it's.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. I mean, it's still evolving. We've had a couple of fairly large COBOL with embedded SQL code bases that are now certainly passing from a preprocessor perspective. We've still got some issues remaining with code generation. Some of the COBOL's not quite right, but it's in pretty good shape. I mean, I would suggest just feel free to contact me, and we can discuss that further. Yeah.
Okay, and with that, I believe we've answered all of the questions. Thank you so much for coming. We will distribute a recording of this meeting and the slides and all of the Q&A that we've answered today. Okay, there is one more question. Question for VSI, will DFS be available on OpenVMS? Brett, can you take this one? I'm not sure what DFS is.
It's not on the roadmap at the moment, Zia, no. But we can have a conversation about that, but it's not currently on the roadmap for x86.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. If you have any further questions, you're always welcome to contact VSI at info@vmssoftware.com or talk to our sales reps, and we'll answer all the questions. And you're very welcome to ask for help with application services. And of course, thank you so much to Oracle for coming and talking about RDB. We've been waiting for this update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks everyone for coming, and have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.